Mr. Roberts, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Perfect, thank you.
Welcome to this meeting of the Village of Pinehurst Planning and Zoning Board. Today is Thursday, February 4th, 2021. It is 4:00 p.m. And I would like to welcome our newest member, Matt Jones, to my right. We will introduce him and talk a little bit about him later on in the meeting. But right now, let's introduce the members that are here and take roll, starting with Matt, and just state your name. And
Jack Farrell.
Jeremy Hooper.
And virtually, can you hear us, Paul?
Yes, I've got you, thank you.
So virtually, we have Paul Roberts. Julia Latham has a family emergency and will not be with us tonight. And Sonia Rothstein has a medical reason to be excused. So we do have 6 of us here, so we have a quorum and we can conduct business. Alex is going to serve as staff to the board tonight. Thank you, Alex. And we will follow the order of the agenda. So the first item on the agenda is approval of minutes for the January 7th, 2021 regular meeting. Are there any questions or corrections? Is everyone? Is there a motion to approve the minutes as written for January 7th?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Jeremy Hooper and a second by Jack Farrell. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Next item of business is public hearing, number 1. So today I'm going to introduce a new process to follow for public hearings that I would like to try. And so since today's public hearing is to consider text amendments to the Pinehurst Development Ordinance, the staff will be introducing the hearing, offering their staff report, and they will also serve as the applicant. So board members are asked to make note of any technical questions or questions for clarity that arise during the staff report, and then staff will address all of these questions at the end of their presentation. And we'll do the same for the text amendments. We'll let them give their whole presentation, and then following that, if we have any questions, we'll ask the questions and address them all at once. And then next, we'll look to the public. We'll ask any members in the audience who would like to speak to give their comments. Then we will read comments that have been submitted. Kelly will do that. And after the public comments are heard, we'll ask staff to respond to any items that come up during the public comments. We'll do all of the responses at once rather than back and forth during that time. And then I will ask each board member to express their concerns or support, and we'll deliberate. And I'm pretty sure we're going to have to continue this meeting till next week, because we have to wait 24 hours and give the public an opportunity to respond, since it is a virtual meeting. So do I have a motion to open the public meeting, hearing?
So moved.
Go ahead. I move to recess the regular meeting and enter into public hearing number 1.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? All right. So we now enter public hearing number 1. Alex and Darren, I'll turn the meeting over to you.
We're going to get, Lori's going to help us pull up, and so we can share the PowerPoint. And also give us the time to let Philip get a little settled there too. All right. And I apologize for not being able to face those in the audience. We just got a little too crowded there near the podium. So public hearing number 1, the purpose of this public hearing is to consider proposed text amendments to section 9.5, 9.14, and chapter 10 of the Pinehurst Development Ordinance. And these are to address tree preservation and landscaping standards. Section 9.5 is sort of our current landscaping requirement section, and these proposed amendments will try to provide clearer purpose, some definitions, clearing and grading permit applications and permits, tree survey requirements, tree removal standards, tree preservation credits, tree removal, exemptions, and violations. Section 9.14 is our section for design standards for single-family dwellings, and these proposed amendments try to address tree retention and planting requirements for that type of development, including tree preservation credits, planting and spacing, minor modifications to preserve trees, trees removed in violation, and continual maintenance. Chapter 10 is our definition section of the Pinehurst Development Ordinance, and these proposed amendments attempt to include new definitions for clearing and grading, development, which is in line with the current North Carolina general statutes, protected trees, redevelopment, specimen tree, and tree preservation yards. This public hearing before the board tonight is a legislative public hearing per North Carolina general statutes, since it does relate to amending the text or the map of the current zoning regulations within the village's jurisdiction. And the purpose of these hearings are to solicit public comment on the proposed amendment, and this public hearing was duly posted and advertised. Okay, Darren and I are going to sort of tag team this a little bit, and I'm going to turn it over to him in just a slide or two. This was compiled by one of our other colleagues in the planning department, and I appreciate the effort that he put forth in getting this. So we're going to talk about some of the history of our comprehensive plans for quite a while. So the reasoning and why we have been working on these proposed amendments. 2003 comprehensive plan states that tree replacement program needs to be established to maintain the continuity of community appearance and character within the public right-of-ways and public spaces. Within peripheral residential areas, community character will be significantly enhanced by establishing street tree planting program. The 2010 comprehensive plan stated, review and revise the PDO, the Pinehurst Development Ordinance, to ensure that it requires extensive landscaping within developments and along streets. It continues, we should consider undertaking programs to improve landscaping along major roads in Pinehurst, both within the road right-of-way and on private property. Enhance existing residential neighborhoods through supporting landscaping, street tree planting, and similar programs. Our most recently adopted 2019 comprehensive plan states that the village should also seek ways to ensure that the tall pines and other native trees are preserved in existing neighborhoods as residential lots are further developed. It is critically important to the character of Pinehurst that the village maintain its tree-lined corridors and encourage the preservation of trees on both public and private property. And finally, enhance the tree preservation program and standards for tree planting and preservation in the Pinehurst Development Ordinance. That speaks specifically to the work that staff has brought before this board this evening that we have been working on since around January of 2018. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Darren. What's that?
All right. So I'm going to take over a couple slides. Thank you, Alex. In our staff report, we put down a sentence, and we think it's very important to what you're considering today and what we've been considering for the last couple of years on this thing, on this ordinance. Trees represent an important part of the environmental, cultural, and historic fabric and identity of the village of Pinehurst. And all we got to do is start with our name, Pinehurst, and you can see kind of how important trees are for this community. So I'm going to go back to a little bit, back to our founding, the creation. So this is a rough map, and Jack, thank you for providing me with this map. This is a rough map and survey for the original land purchase for the Pinehurst area. And you can see all the dots on that map. Those represent trees. And this area was kind of known as the Pine Barrens, right, Jack? I've been reading Jack's book. It's a great book. Read it. So I picked this out from it, and you can see where I have that line, the Pine Grove. That was the original Pine Grove that was so critical to the early design of this community. And you'll see it in the next slide. So when we start to talk about, why is this ordinance so important to this community and that historic fabric, and you look at the original general design plan for the village of Pinehurst, you can see a heavy dose of trees and tree buffers around all the parcels on that rendering. So you can see the village green, it's outlined with trees. Then you can see some vacant parcels that actually have trees around it. So what we're kind of proposing to do with this ordinance is replicate and build on some of the original landscape plans and design plans for this community. When Pinehurst was established in 1895, the area had been cut over for lumber and was essentially a blank canvas. So that, when they sat down to design and do the landscape design for this community, landscaping was a very important aspect of its growth. We pulled this from Manning's plant list. This is the planting list from the Pinehurst Outlook, and you can't see the lines on there, but it says trees, shrubs, vines, and plants which transform what was once a portion of the Great Sandhill Desert. So again, what we're seeing at the foundation of Pinehurst and where we've taken it, where we've evolved the community, and where we're trying to build on is, that word transform what was once the Sandhill Desert, and we're building upon that with this ordinance. Building upon that. The important one is the last line here. This is constructing Eden, the early days of Pinehurst, North Carolina. Each home then appeared to be set in its own private forest. And the ordinance itself is not proposing you to create a private forest. What we're proposing to do is establish buffers and maintain buffers around each home. So it's in keeping, again, with the historical context of some of the things of the community. Here's a first aerial photo of the Pinehurst area. Again, you can start to see the establishment of those tree-lined buffers along the streets. Here's some buffers, early Pinehurst. Again, buffers were an important historical aspect of this community. Another one there, tree-lined streets. We're not proposing it at this level. We're proposing trees at this point to help produce that buffer, create that buffer. Now, this is very interesting. Trees were also used as our first actual industrial buffer. So if you look at this letter from Olmsted Firm to James Walker Tufts, 1895, it says, we think we must have failed to make ourselves clear in regards to the windmill. Our advice was to place the tank with or without the windmill down by the railroad. The pine grove would conceal. There you have it. The first aspect of buffering use of trees, that pine grove would conceal a greater part of the trestle work supporting the tank. So you can see we've been using trees and vegetation as a historic buffer in the community. I'm going to turn it over to Alex now.
All right, so it's all right. So we're trying to paint the full picture for everyone here. So now let's talk more about what we can, what we cannot do, and that is set forth by and governed by the North Carolina General Statutes. Most of you guys remember that Chapter 160D, which was a consolidation of the planning and land development regulation for the state of North Carolina, recently went into effect 1st of this year. I provided some what I would call a training as we were operating under COVID protocols. We still are somewhat today on Chapter 160D. But straight from there, it says, again, it sets forth the enabling legislation for subdivisions of the state, the counties and municipalities. 160D 701 under purposes states that zoning regulations shall be made in accordance with the comprehensive plan and shall be made with reasonable consideration to the character of the district. Furthermore, the specific grant of power within 160D 702 states that a local government may adopt zoning regulations. However, there are certain and very specific exemptions from that. One of those exceptions from zoning grant of power for counties and municipalities relates to, in quotes, building design elements that are strictly applied to development that are subject to the North Carolina Building Code for 1 and 2 family dwellings. Further down in Chapter 160D, Section 702, it states that building design elements do not include the use of buffering or screening to minimize visual impacts to mitigate the impacts of light and noise, or to protect the privacy of neighbors. So you'll see that reflected in our purpose and intent within this ordinance. Right off the bat in section 9.5.1, you'll see, and I'll just paraphrase some of this because this is even a small portion of the opening paragraph there. It says that these regulations will around the perimeter of parcels of land such that buffer yards are retained and created to reduce visual effects and the impacts of traffic, noise, dust, and odor, as well as protect the privacy of neighborhoods. Of course, and also by doing so, they will preserve and enhance the visual character of the village and ETJ. Added benefits are increase the soil's ability to absorb and retain water, therefore reducing erosion and surface water runoff, another big issue we're seeing here within the village. Enhance air quality, provide energy shading and cooling for canopy roads, and furnish wildlife for habitat. Objectives of how staff decided to tackle such an ordinance. To enhance the current landscaping standards within the Pinehurst Development Ordinance, you guys heard what I read from all these previous comprehensive plans. So this has come of public comment and feedback within this community for years, and especially in line with the most recently adopted 2019 comprehensive plan. And to try to address these areas, create these screening or buffer yards to address mass clear cutting of lots that have not applied or are subject to approval of any other type of proposed development or a site plan that has been submitted for review and approval of the village, and then to beef up the standards that we have for single-family development. Here are some pictures that we've taken from the area here. The one on the left is actually looking down Linden Road. You see that tree-lined street. And the one on the right is recent development in the past few years here in the village, where subdivisions have kind of come in, and you see, this met all the requirements at the time. There are no issues. However, is it really meeting the objective and the comment that we've received from this jurisdiction? So the approach, in order to have a successful development standard, it's got to be carried out, and it's got to be carried out administratively by the staff successfully. Any such standards like this are administrative reviews, and therefore they must be as objective as possible. This is the reason why we decided to go with the requirements we did based on the linear footage of the lots, and that would also accomplish being able to handle lots that vary, that are different sizes, that have different shapes. So there's sort of a sliding scale that will apply to a 2-acre lot as it would to a 1/4-acre lot. And as you can see, we have placed a heavy emphasis on the street front yards, so the buffer yards that do abut a street. As you'll see, there's a higher required planting count for that. And based on feedback from this board a couple of months ago, we have built in one single 20-foot driveway allowance that would not count toward the required dimension for plantings. And in order to incentivize the protection of the existing mature vegetation on the lots with proposed development, we are within the ordinance allowing for an applicant to receive credit for existing mature vegetation that's healthy for any trees greater than 12-inch diameter breast height. So the landscaping standard is that it has to be met, and it can be met by either planting new trees or by preserving the ones that are on site. Furthermore, if you have more large mature trees on site, 16 inches diameter breast height or DBH or larger, we'll give you a credit at a rate for 1 tree for every 4 inches over that. Existing developed lots, this was another challenge that kind of emerged. Current homeowners who are established in a lot that already received a development approval prior to these standards being enacted. How do we handle this so that the standards aren't too onerous for them to be able to add on or further develop their lot? So we propose to handle this in the existing lots of record section. And summarizing that without having to go through all the particulars of the ordinance is that basically whatever standards that were in place at that time, which is what we currently have in our PDO, which is seen in the table on the right above, would just have to be kept and maintained. If any development, or as we define it, redevelopment, would be proposed for these existing lots of record to where you're going beyond a 50% threshold of the building size or development on that lot. So you're doing an addition to your home that's 50% greater than what you currently are, then the new standards would apply. And as we discussed in previous planning board meetings, that's a pretty substantial addition. So we just want to clarify that this has been updated. The ordinance that was put out in the packet was a little contrary to that. We meant to say what we're saying now in the text, and we have revised that text, and you guys have I think a printed off copy of page 8 that clearly states that. Clearing and grading, this was another objective that we wanted to try to address, as we've heard time and time again in these meetings, at these forums. Clearing and grading is now clearly defined within the proposed ordinance, and it basically tries to address the clearing and grading of any vacant parcels prior to any other development approval. So now a clearing and grading permit under this ordinance would be required when there is no active application for any type of development permit as required by the PDO. The requirements of the information to be provided to obtain a clearing and grading permit and what those standards are, which would still be to create those buffer yards on the sides, rear, and along the street front, would need to be met with an application, either with providing new plantings or preserving the existing vegetation around the perimeter. Administrative modifications. We received a lot of feedback from this group last time we met, and luckily that was pretty much the last bit of information it seemed like, or feedback we could have gotten from you guys. So we looked at it, and there needs to be an opportunity where administrative staff can allow for some modifications to these standards. And so what we have built in is that we can allow for preservation of trees within the building envelope instead of just within those buffer areas. So if there's not adequate enough space within those buffer yards to meet the requirements. Also, smaller trees could be used if there's certain criteria that the applicants would have to propose that they meet in order for us to allow for these minor modifications. So Kathy, Darren, and I spent a lot of time, and we threw out just about every scenario we could think of. We feel pretty comfortable enough with what we have proposed at this point. Of course, there's always the Board of Adjustment as a relief valve, but we wanted to build in enough modifications to not have the Board of Adjustment flooded with any type of request for varying these standards. All right, now on to our current comprehensive plan. I'm just going to read a little bit directly from there. Page 124, under Guiding Principle 3, Places to Live, and under Protect and Enhance Existing Neighborhoods, it states, improve neighborhood appearance, and implementation strategy 3.1 further states the village should periodically evaluate standards for landscape design and planting and amend standards as necessary to meet the needs and desires of the village. Staff feels confidently that this proposed ordinance checks that box. Page 203, under Guiding Principle 7, all things green, parks, open spaces, and natural resources. And for protecting Pinehurst natural resources, preserve trees, states the urban forest is an important aesthetic, economic, and environmental asset to Pinehurst. It contributes positively to the character of the village, the health of the environment, the quality of life of residents, and the experience of visitors. And I think in your staff report, you'll see that implementation strategy 7.6 seems to be the strongest direction that's given from the comprehensive plan that says the village is to enhance the tree preservation program and standards for tree planting and preservation within the Pinehurst Development Ordinance. That's the reason why we have worked and brought forward what we have for public hearing this evening. All right, action by this board, as you all know, this is required by general statute that any proposed amendments to the text of the ordinance must be reviewed and considered by the Planning and Zoning Board as an advisory board to the governing board. After conducting a duly advertised public hearing, you are to formulate a recommendation on such to the village council, as well as adopt a statement of consistency with the current comprehensive plan. You, of course, have the opportunity to receive public input make any suggested revisions to the ordinance. And at the conclusion of this public hearing, with this being as defined by general statutes, as a remote meeting, there will be no action on this item this evening. Staff has proposed that you guys, after receiving the required public comment and attendees' feedback that are here this evening, that you recess the meeting till next Thursday, February 11th at 4 p.m. to be conducted in the same manner that we are today, and will also be able to be viewed and live stream at the village's website. And other members of the public who would like to further comment on this proposal may do so by providing those comments to the clerk to the board at kbrown@vopnc.org. All right.
And we're just going to close,
Let Darren close.
just before we close, to try and put this into context, in addition to that cultural, the historic discussion that we had about why trees are important, we just created a basic slide on what are benefits of preserving trees. It could be preserving and planting trees. What are benefits of trees in general? Trees are part of the village of Pinehurst charm and history. I think we established that. Maintaining trees along streetscapes narrows the vision of the driver and encourages safer driver behavior. Trees can increase property values. Trees clean the air and help buffer noise and pollution. Trees slow water runoff and help prevent soil erosion. Trees can help save money on energy costs and cool our homes. Trees assist in the separation of uses and privacy of neighboring properties. And you see a lot of those benefits are actually in the purpose that we established in the ordinance. So with that, I think with that, our presentation is essentially done. Basically, what I'd like to go back to is, you can see this ordinance that we're moving forward is not something that we just whipped up out of nowhere. It's been something that's been important to this community for a number of years. We've been working on it for a number of years. We've come at it from many different approaches. We looked at, is there a way to do a clear-cutting ordinance? We didn't think that there was a practical way of doing the clear-cutting ordinance. So we looked at this very different ways. The ordinance itself does not prevent you from cutting down a tree. It doesn't. You can cut down trees under this ordinance. What it says is, once you start to do development, then you're establishing and creating buffers, and you will be planting trees. So, but, we do give you the ability to have credits as part of that system. So that we felt was a very important offset, and we're hoping that, the long-term impact or effect of this ordinance as proposed will be more preservation of trees in the community, as well as the creation of more buffers within the community. So with that, Alex, you got anything else you'd like to add?
I think that's a good close. I mean, we really have worked for a while on this. We've got it to a point where we were comfortable to bring it to you guys for some feedback the past few months, and we are comfortable enough to bring it for a public hearing now.
So are you going to present anything else with the ordinances? People can just read those online, correct? Or is this the staff report, or is this staff and, just for clarity?
All the information can be made available as it was noticed, and they can visit or contact the planning department at any time if they want to get the text. We're not going to read through the actual text of the ordinance, but it is available, and we do know folks we have shared it. Darren and I have, as requests have come in, and it's available. It's on the website. It's on the Pinehurst Novus Agenda website as well.
Okay, so then I will ask, do any of the board members have questions for clarity or technical questions that they want to ask before we go to public comments? Jeremy?
So both the 2003 and the 2010 comp plan mention a street tree planting program. Do either of you know that if any such program was ever put in place? And if so, where are we now with it, or did anything ever happen with the program?
Closest, well, you've been here longer, but the only thing that I can see in our ordinance is the subdivision regs have a street tree planting requirement. Outside of that, I'm not aware of it.
That's the only thing that jumps to my mind, that, you know, we've had some major subdivision reviews that have come through, that you guys have reviewed the plat on, and the requirement is one street tree per 40 linear feet. So that came about, I'm not sure the genesis of that, if that came from these comprehensive plans, when the PDOs were updated from that. I do know, just very recently, and if I really wanted to put her on the spot, I could throw Kelly over here. But I do know that there is the village council just looked at having a tree plan for public property, like especially in our public spaces. But that came about from Tree City USA, is that correct? Thank you.
My point in mentioning that, and I just wanted to make sure that I was correct, that I don't think any such true program was ever set in place, but there's certainly precedent, longstanding request precedent in our comp plans that it's been desired at least
Been ever present for quite some time.
some time. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Does anyone else have a question or technical question or?
I just have one clarification question relative to the 50% additional, which would essentially trigger this ordinance. Is 50% the building envelope? Is that the size of the house? And what if someone has a one-story house and they add a second floor directly over it?
Tie that back to the non-conforming.
It says expansion in the size of an existing building, so I would look at going up would mean increasing the existing size. We are certainly open to further discussion on that if we think maybe, if you're not really expanding the footprint, maybe it's 50% of the development footprint of the lot. If you're going up, maybe it's not necessarily, or does it trigger, you know, coming into full compliance, as maybe you need more buffering and privacy from the neighbors. So we're certainly welcome to feedback on that.
Well, I don't know the right answer, but I know there have been examples where on the same footprint, a second floor has been added, and you're probably familiar with those too.
So,
You're technically adding to you're technically developing, you're adding to the volume of the building, so that would be an expansion if you're adding a floor.
Okay.
I know we've vetted this a lot and really kicked a lot at you too, so thank you for letting us do that. But my question, can you speak to a little bit about how much vetting maybe to specific plans, how many specific plans maybe you've looked at in lots, and how many scenarios that you've gotten into to probably show the extent that you two have done from a staffing standpoint?
And thank you, Jeremy. I wish there were more time in the afternoon that Darren and I had today to really show you guys just the work that's done. Kathy, I believe yesterday, by the way, Kathy Lyles, everyone, I don't know if we got to introduce her earlier. She's been integral part of helping Darren and I with this so we can do our other day-to-day activities as well. She spent the better part of the afternoon going around taking pictures and development she knows. Myself and another colleague did the same, and in doing so, I went back, I know at least through April of last year. We've recently implemented an online permitting center so I can easily access files and site plans. I looked at tree surveys that were prepared with site plans for single-family development. I've asked our other colleague who does our site zoning inspections to, have you seen some where they've left a lot of trees? They didn't just meet the minimum requirement of 4 qualifying trees. And what about where that was all? They had to go and actually plant more just to meet the minimum 4 tree requirement. And we followed up through that. I've taken those site plans. One meeting, we shared some of those with you where we just did the math on some of these lots. We grabbed some funky shaped lots. I know personally, I've probably looked at 20 or 25 lots and site surveys, tree surveys, and visited probably at least that amount more in mind with trying to apply these standards or what went wrong or what we could do right.
How about cost estimations, to speak to any sort of extent that you may be adding cost to, to a home price?
And we do know that that is a concern. My answer to that could be, it is a development standard for required planting. So it is, if you just look at sheer quantities of number of plantings from what we have now to what we're proposing, it might be a bit of a shock. However, the incentive is to preserve what's on site. If you preserve what's on site, if you think, it's really, to get folks to think ahead of the development a little bit before just going in there and just blitzkrieging the lot there. So if you preserve them, there is no added cost.
And I think we did add that for some of those concerns to try and not require, or give you an alternative to not require the planting, to build in those credits. And I think we were pretty generous. We started off with something that was more rigid. And I think over the course of the work sessions that we had, that credit, I think, expanded a little bit. So it started with, I don't know, what is it, a one-on-one, and then I think we started to look at, you got more credit for saving larger trees. So there's a lot of credits. You have a lot of options in there to not have to plant some trees.
Well, not,
I'm saying a lot of that came from experience that we've been able to build on in our department and trying to apply the standards we have currently in place, especially as it is for the required planted buffers for multifamily development or non-residential development that's abutting other residential uses, where it actually, our current regulations, if you take them at the face, it would be best to meet those regulations if you got rid of every mature tree on site and then just came back with a couple of small 3-inch caliber trees. So we've been able to build on that experience, and it further constricts you in where you can place the required plantings. The shrubs can't be within a drip line of a mature tree. Well, I don't have room to fit it because I got this grand tree I want to keep here, so I might as well just chop it down and go. So yeah, we've applied a lot of our experience that we have in trying to craft this and build in modifications where we think it definitely would warrant it.
And again, a lot of that came from the conversations that we had together here at Village Hall.
that was going to be what I mentioned, is I think a lot of our conversations have been directed towards trying to make sure that you understood the cost a lot. From what I recall, not to lead you, but I think we've done a pretty extensive look into that to understand it and to, for what we can. I think you've dug into that pretty deep, and I just wanted people to hear that. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeremy. Does anyone else have any questions or comments they want to make?
Hey, Cynthia, if I could,
Yes, Paul?
just to start off with a couple comments. I mean, it seems to be very much in line what the, citizens of Pinehurst have been saying over the years during these sensing sessions that put the comp plan together, so appears to be in line with that. There was I guess, two things with the, the technical aspect. I think there's 2 or 3 times it says at the discretion of the village planner. I mentioned this last month. I would at all effort try to remove that subjectivity and be more objective. The 2 sentences that it's in, you can almost delete it and still get the meaning out of the sentence. If that's not desired, then possibly some type of objective comment, because that's where the double standard could occur based upon someone's perception of it. I believe we're defining a protected tree as 8-inch in diameter, but the survey requires a 6-inch in diameter. If we're not protecting a 6-inch tree, does it need to be on the survey? That's more of a rhetorical question than, me looking for an answer right now. I would ask that, as we go into further developments and build out of the village, should new subdivisions, should we look at, asking Duke, or however you do that with your utilities, put them underground instead of, poles and lines. All you have to do is go down Midland Road and see how Duke Energy has just, cut trees, made them look pretty strange. It's better to almost cut it all the way down to have a tree that looks, a bit odd and not in line with the treescape, if you will. And then the other thing is, has there been any consideration, federal, state, or private tree preservation, funding, kind of an Arbor Day type event, where you could try to, not only get this ink dry, get it approved, but also do something within the village to get some attention on, the further development of the desire to have the, tree-lined roads, the buffer areas, and other things. Thank you.
I would like to just maybe ask for a clarification on a point. I think part of the reason we included the smaller trees in the survey is that we allow you to use those trees that are between 3 and 8 inches in the event you don't have any larger trees, because it's better to preserve an existing smaller tree than to plant a smaller tree. So that was kind of one reason for putting that in there, but I just want to clarify, are you suggesting that we'd be better to just go to 8 inches on that language?
I'm not suggesting that. We're saying a protected tree is 8 inches, but now it goes back to you have to survey more trees that are not required to be protected.
Okay. Thank you.
And Paul had discussed a little bit about the tree, and I can't find the page that's on right now, on that flexibility that we originally had included in the ordinance. Based on our conversation, we did tighten that down a bit with this ordinance proposal. There's still going to be some subjectivity. There's some subjectivity in various parts of the entire ordinance, but we tried to clamp that down a little bit. And I think we actually put a ratio in there of some sort, a distance. Kathy, do you recall that? Oh, there it is.
Got it.
Bottom of page 7 and top of page 8, I think it discusses the discretion of the village manager, or village planner.
I'm just actually searching the document for references to village planner. There are a couple of instances, I think we included village planner to actually make things a little bit more functional. One may be if you're doing a tree survey and you're protecting a large tree area, rather than come back in and survey the trees in that area, it allows the planner to say, you're not impacting that area, you don't have to survey trees there, or we can use a large-scale infrared aerial or some other type of documentation. And so I think, in a sense, there's some administrative flexibility there, but the focus on that flexibility is to work with the applicant to keep costs down, more so than to increase the amount of work that would be done. The administrative, or what we call the minor modifications, because that is an administrative function of the village planner, I think we kept village planner in under those circumstances, but I think there's several references to village planner we could certainly look at and see if we even need to keep the phrase in.
And I think specifically the one we added to try and get at a more objective measure was, if you look on page 8, 8E2, to allow preservation of trees within the building envelope if they're within a distance, and here's where we had to build a calculation in, within a distance no greater than the required yard depth when insufficient trees are available for preservation. So that was what we, based on some of those concerns to try and remove some of that subjectivity and put a number to it, we built that particular provision. And Paul's last comment on the Arbor Day and funding around it, I don't think we've done anything like that. We have the Tree City USA. We've had the Arbor Day resolution. It's something we can look at. It's more of a public services thing, but we can work with the administration on that and look into that, Paul.
That satisfy your questions, Paul?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. Anyone else? We ready for the
Just
public?
one comment. The National Park Service is kicking off a study of our historic landmark status, and the consultants will be with us for the next 6 months or so, and will provide an assessment. I think that this ordinance could be used as a marketing tool to the National Park Service, showing them that we recognize and, we're ready to respond to the community's interest to respect our heritage relative to the founding of Pinehurst and the value of landscaping and trees in the community. And that's been well known. Of course, the historic landmark border is quite small, even compared to the local landmark, and pretty well developed. However, you never know what's going to happen. So I think it's a point well taken that we could use it as a tool to describe what the positive things we're doing.
It could show a commitment to preserving that, yeah.
Right.
It does, and it does, this ordinance would apply in those areas, so it would preserve and create buffer yards in that area, in that important part of the community, or in that old historic, very important part of the community.
Right, and it directly relates to your introduction too, with showing the history.
I'm sure the USDA would appreciate that as well.
I don't know if anyone ever thought of writing a grant, I mean, I'm sure we're all aware of grants that have been written for crazier things, and see if you get funding, and then that way it'll offset some of the other costs that may be associated with, folks, trying to fund their own tree project.
All right, let's go to the public hearing portion, or?
I've got one more. Yeah. So kind of taking what Jeremy was saying a little bit deeper, in respect to the heritage, but also to the citizens' pockets. So what would you say is the average lot size? I mean, I'm not put you on the spot here.
Yeah, I'd say that our meat and potato is probably the R10 zoning district, so a minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet. So that's probably, 10 to 15,000 square feet, give or take.
So if you took a square lot in a perfect world, have you worked with like a general contractor to find out what the average cost might be? I mean, all things considered, market variables are going to change. But, are we looking at, is that a $2,000 cost or a $5,000 cost or to a homeowner? Just taking it, I'm not asking anybody to answer, but that needs to be something we should consider, also thinking for the public's sake.
Sure, and one thing that we tried to do too is, and I'm hearing this in my other daily roles with other development, availability of stock, and that's why I think we tried to allow for differing sizes and of just to have availability, and also, a 3 or 4 inch tree is probably not going to cost the same as a 2-inch tree or a taller or slender tree. So no, I cannot speak to the cost. I know we've had other colleagues we can pull on, that we have an arborist on staff who checks some local stock, so we can just try to bolster the argument that, there needs to be an opportunity for us to allow for smaller trees to be planted if there's just not available. So, again, I know you're not looking for an answer, but.
The absolute cost of planting the trees is required. We could run a calculation. I don't know if we've done that, but what we can do is we can pull some of the letters of credit where we have for some of the landscaping and pull and see how much those letters of credit are how much the trees are showing up and the vegetation and landscaping showing up in some of those letters of credit, and we can run a calc.
Yeah, just curious. I'm hearing a lot, especially in my day job, where construction costs are exceeding appraisal costs. I mean, that seems to be a recurring theme nowadays. So just something to keep in mind that we are aware of what those costs are.
And it may be something that the board is able to hear whenever you receive some public comment on.
Kind of a comment upon that as well, if you don't mind, sort of jump in. But Philip, I think something that was important to me through this process really was the trade-off process and an opportunity for people developing a lot. And so that was something, a lot of times when we got down to talking about 6-inch, we were talking about the opportunity for someone to utilize that in the calculation to trade off other trees so that they could save. And so I think the staff's done a pretty good job of trying to make it where everybody would have the opportunity to keep as many trees in preservation. And I think that's probably the first choice that I would, for me, would be preservation.
In a perfect scenario where those trees are available.
I'm in a similar world when we talk about, regulatory cost of homes and that type of thing, and then fair housing, and I get it, man, yeah, so it's border. Thanks.
Anyone
Yeah,
else?
I think recognizing that as well, some of the discussion we just had, I think we supported, I think we had gone into it with a minimum of 3-inch caliper, and based on the discussions, I think we throttled that back a little bit. Did I pass it? Yeah, 2 inch, so we started at 3, we did
Yeah,
throttle that back.
don't,
yeah.
don't be confused, I'm not arguing anything, I'm just
No.
saying, we should be aware of the cost to the homeowner in general scale.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. You could take your picture of the development that had very few, if any, trees, and calculate on each one of those lots what the increased cost might have been or will be. Let me put it that way.
And again, the hope is to incentivize as much as possible keeping what's there.
Well, and even if it is arguing for keeping what's there, you could say, look, if you were to clear cut this, these are the costs you're gonna realize in replanting, here's your savings otherwise. I mean, there's multiple ways to show it, I think.
And again, I apologize that I didn't have some of the stuff prepared, but you know, when Jeremy asked this question earlier, that's one of the things that I would do whenever I would try to apply these new standards based on stuff that was submitted for our current standards. And if you look on the tree survey, like, well, if you save this, you save this one, you save that one, and you save this one, and then you save that one, and I would put them, make sure they were in the required yards within the required area, didn't have to plant a single thing, or maybe the net result was they had to plant 2. So,
That's right.
But thank you for the comment, Philip.
Is the village, do they do any other cost estimates, like what square foot would be or landscaping? If they don't, I don't know why we would associate a decision with cost.
No, I don't think we've done that, but I think, you know, we can, we'll, between now and the next time we meet, we can at least look into that, look into this, but it's a straightforward calculation. We could essentially start with a vacant lot and go off of that. It should be a relatively easy calculation. Generally, at the planning and zoning level, that, you know, you're looking less at the fiscal end of it as you are looking at the, just at the general planning end. When it bounces up to council, yeah, they're supposed to be considering that broader depth, but it's something you should be aware of. So we've made a note. We'll make a look, we'll look at between now and next we meet.
Are we ready for the public comments? Kelly, do we have? Okay. So we have 2 requests. One is for the Moore County Home Builders Association, and is there a representative for that association? I don't have a name on here.
Cindy, I got an email from them.
That's the email one. Okay, I'm sorry. Leo Santuaso, would you like to speak? Yes, it's your turn.
Good evening, folks, and thank you for all your hard work. Mr. Biden takes off his mask when he speaks, so I'm going to do the same thing. A little bit of history, and I won't be too long. As Alex mentioned, this process has been in the works, excuse me, for a little over 3 years. A meeting was called by Jeff Sanborn, perhaps in response to what happened at Walker Station, where they cleared lot line to lot line. And when we originally started out, we talked primarily about tree clear cutting. But over time, it has evolved into a process of tree preservation. And I think that's the right way to go. We need to preserve the Sandhills longleaf pine ecosystem, which was recognized by the several comprehensive long-range plans down through the years. That was even envisioned, I believe, by Olmsted and Manning. So I think this kind of approach to a tree preservation program is completely in line with what's the right thing to do. This document is going to turn into be like a living document that's going to be subject to review periodically over time. I don't think taking more time to study this thing or that thing is going to resolve a question that may come up in the future where the board and the council can make amendments at any time to this that better fits the situation that might be out there. Because the conditions that are out there are not perfect. And if it was a perfect world, everything would be a lot easier. There has to be consideration given to certain specific, site-specific conditions that are going to be different probably for every application that comes in. And the planning department needs to have some discretion in how the regulations are applied to make adjustments where necessary, but still retain and contain the purpose and intent of screening and buffering. With regard to the question that came up on the 50%, whether it's over or under, I think there's other definitions that could apply there, or maybe a modification needs to be made in that particular phrase. And I would suggest that anything that increases the floor area of more than 50% would apply for, should apply for a new application. As I said, this thing has been underway for 3 years. We've had applications other than Walker Station, such as, and I can't think of it now, but I do. Winston Pines, they started out in the right direction, preserving trees around the houses within the building envelope. But in the last several months, where they cleared about 4 or 5 lots in a row around the backside of the development, they just went property line to property line and, in essence, did a clear cutting. We have a couple of applications in the works now, major subdivisions that have been approved that are not yet into the construction phase. And I think that needs to be considered in your adoption of this, a recommendation of this proposed ordinance to Village Council to approve it as soon as possible, namely Floyd Way and Pinehurst South Cottages. Both of those developments are in areas heavily wooded, and the ecosystem, the pine trees, the other vegetation in those areas needs to be preserved. And my recommendation is for this board to recommend approval of this proposed ordinance to council as soon as possible so that the council can approve, the ordinance can be amended, and the regulation in place before we have to contend with any more major development. Thank you.
Thank you, Leo. Is there anyone else in attendance that would like to speak? State your name for.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. My name's Landon White, and You know, with respect to, understanding with trees, nobody would deny the importance of trees. I, as much as anyone, throughout the week, I look forward to the weekend so I can get out and spend some time in the woods. However, what we're looking at here, when it comes to passing an ordinance that is going to regulate the trees on private property, what people can and cannot do with those trees, I think you need to stop and look at what the effects of that are going to be. This is being looked at as in a couple of different ways. One is a buffer, but if you're placing trees, 15 feet apart, block noise on the front of the lot, 35 feet apart to block noise on the back of the lot, 25 feet on the sides. What noise is really being blocked by that? And why do you need to regulate trees in the back of a lot where there's not an adjacent to a street to buffer the noise from the street? The tree preservation here, I don't see that it's about canopy cover, and it's not about tree density on the lots. This is about making sure that the perimeter of the lots have a certain number of trees on there. And the pictures that were shown today were of the streets lined with trees. And I think to that extent, this is an aesthetic ordinance. It's certain, aspects in terms of drainage and things, but from the Forestry Service that they may note in the ordinances that are looking to address canopy cover and tree density are cited, but this is really about being able to drive down the street and it being lined with pine trees. And to that extent, you're getting closer into the realm of a design standards, and even though this might not be a building design standard as it's currently described by the statute, it's the same line of thought with what led to the legislature saying you can't do that and regulate design standards, and that's exactly what this is. This is a design standard that's related to, private persons' use of their private property. And it's true that right now, buffers, as written in 160D-704 and the grant of powers are not accepted the way that the design standards are. However, the grants of power are narrow. They're not broad. There's already been legislation that's been considered to address the municipality and the county's authority to regulate trees. 36 municipalities and 2 counties have sought a local act authorizing them to go in and do so. So I think that there are alternative ways that if this is going to be done, then it could withstand some potential challenges, because there likely are going to be challenges when you tell private people what they can and can't do, with their property. And here, particularly here, it's almost as if in passing this ordinance, and then not allowing the person to do particular activities within that what's being called a buffer zone, but really is it a buffer zone or is it a right-of-way? And to that extent, if the property owner wants a buffer, then they're going to put a buffer in. This is about Pinehurst wanting to have trees on the side of the road. And to that extent, why do you need the trees in the back of the lot if you want trees in the front of the road? But these are questions I don't know the answers to, but I'm just putting these out there as things that may need to be considered as you're considering going forward. But is this an example of local government encroaching on private property and the owner's right to use and enjoy their property? To that extent, does it become a regulatory taking of the private property, especially people who already have property in Pinehurst and now have to go out and have to consider what this new ordinance, how it's going to affect their ability to use this property, that they didn't buy into that property knowing that this regulation was in place the way, if there's a private restrictive covenant in a neighborhood, a person buys that property knowing that they have that private restrictive covenant and have to live by it. Would this ordinance have a disparate impact on low-income individuals in the Pinehurst area? Would the passage of this have a chilling effect on further development in the Pinehurst area, causing a possible decrease in tax revenue or something like that? And I don't have the answers to all those questions, but I do think there are questions to be considered. And to the extent there's a preservation, it's not about a canopy cover, and it's not about a density. It's about the perimeter of the lots.
Thank you, Landon.
Madam Chairman, am I allowed to ask a question? If
We're
not, it's
going to
okay.
wait until
No problem.
we hear all of the public comments, and then just make a note of your question. John, did you want to speak? State your name for the record. To begin.
John Hoffman. I'm a resident of Everett Road, Old Town Pinehurst. First of all, I'm in favor of this attempt to beautify the village. However, I think that there's a duality here. We seem to be going after the developers, saying we're against clear cutting, we want this, that, certain caliper trees, and all the rest of that. However, when the village's presentation was made, they showed, I guess, a scene from the old village, and then some of the new development. And the difference was striking. But it was not only the lots, it was the right-of-way. Tree-lined streets speaks to the right-of-way. The earliest Pinehurst development ordinances discuss the village right-of-way in great detail. Latter ones don't. There was the street, then there was a swale, then there was a clay path, and in the swale were trees and shrubs. The trees and shrubs delineated the tree-lined aspect of Pinehurst. Remnants of this can be seen in Old Town. I say remnants because the village has allowed this system to deteriorate and disappear. Some cases, they've removed it themselves. I'm in favor of trees. I'm also in favor of restoring the village's right-of-way in Old Town especially. Mr. Farrell mentioned that they were going to be under review for 6 months. Nothing would, I think, enhance our position than if there was some type of a program to restore the village's right-of-way. As I say, you can drive around Fields Road, Everett, Kelly, Short. You'll see remnants because they were, for either monetary or disease or whatever, they just always allowed to fall apart. The clay paths disappeared. Gradually, the shrubs disappeared. Later on, the trees start disappearing. I mean, we have a problem in the village just in the trees. Many of them were planted more than 100 years ago. There's no replacement that I can see. The streetscape was lined with magnolias, hollies, and in-between shrubs. That was the way the village was laid out. And unfortunately, it's in sad disrepair. So I think not only the developers need to bear some cost, but I think the village itself does. I'd like to see some type of a restoration program. But basically, I'm in favor of anything that will preserve trees. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Is there anyone else? Colette?
Colette Kalinsky, 25 Queens Court. I didn't think I was going to have to speak today because 6 years ago, I brought up the clear-cutting situation. Example, at the end of my street, we have 2 houses. Were trees, and there's still about a 20-inch stump, and it's probably about 15 inches in diameter, and they clear-cut it down so that they could park their truck on the grass. This has started it. The house next to it did the same thing. So 6 years ago, I got on this fact of where were all the trees going. Not only did they cut down the pine trees, they left the poor trees that weren't indigenous to this area, and then eventually cut those down too. So eventually I became concerned about this and started fighting for the trees to be preserved. Winston Place or Winston Pines, whichever it was, I was one of the few people at that original meeting where the developer was told he needed to leave a buffer. And that buffer was to remain untouched. And basically, it was because that property was rezoned from 5 acres to 1 acre. Actually, the houses most of them are on less than an acre. So part of the stipulation was to leave that buffer. The developer came in, took away those trees. I remember at that meeting specifically, he thought he should have the right, and he wasn't going to be able to sell the properties if those tree buffer areas were not developable. And he fought very much against that. He also fought at this last meeting saying that it was the property's right to put the fence all the way through the buffer and not, so by the time he passed off to the actual builder, the land had been cleared, the trees weren't there as evidence, but if you look at old landscapes or old pictures of it, you will see there were trees there. So he cleared them. And then he said, well, there's no trees there. No, there's no trees there because you cleared the buffer. Then the properties were sold. The people who bought the properties didn't know about any of this. And that's how this all came about. And I just think for somebody to argue, I presented a document today to Darren. I think it's Darren, right, Darren? And it's probably about 30 pages about how this has been handled in the rest of North Carolina. And it's so well written that actually all you have to do as an individual community is just put your name in and put what you decide you want. It's written, it's been there. So for somebody to say there's no like precedent and this is all about restricting rights, it's been there. It's been there for quite a while. Thank you.
Thank you, Colette. I think that's everyone that's in the audience. And then we have an email for Kelly to read from the Moore County Home Builders Association.
Yes, we only received one email. This is from Paula Nash. She's the executive officer of Moore County Home Builders Association. And she wrote, on behalf of the members of the Moore County Home Builders Association, we believe this tree ordinance is detrimental to our industry. We have not had the proper time to study the impact. At first glance, we can immediately see substantial added costs to each build for our members. Our membership would like to have a working relationship with the Village of Pinehurst staff and boards, and to that end, we request more time to do our due diligence to understand all sides. We want to understand the need for the ordinance, as well as for you all to understand how it impacts us. I would appreciate a committee of our members along with your staff to find a common ground. We all want to protect our beautiful town. Let's do so together. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Kelly. So Alex and Darren, would you like to comment? Points that have been brought up by the public at this time?
Landon had a long list of comments. I'm not prepared I'm not prepared to respond at this point, Alex.
I mean, we appreciate all that, and to Ms. Nash's comment, Darren and I have just recently had the opportunity to meet with her, sit down with her, and have some open communication, so we certainly welcome, and she knows how to get in touch with us, so if we need to discuss much further as this process moves along, we'll be glad to, if they haven't had the opportunity or don't take the opportunity to watch this meeting video and see the staff presentation, to be able to paint the full picture. Granted, we met on another topic, and it might be a little new for some of them, but we're make ourselves available to discuss the proposed ordinance.
Does it matter who's doing the work or why the development might be occurring on a lot? Whether it's not the onus of the owner, if it's some outside influence saying, all right, owner, you got to do this work now, who's responsible for those credits at that point? If it's not voluntary work, if it's brought on by some other kind of action.
Try me again, David.
So I'm trying to think of a situation where some development might need to happen on somebody's land. They need to remedy some situation that's not by their creation. It's not their choice that some other entity comes in and says, you got to come do this. Who's responsible for the credits and taking care of any additions at that point? Does it pass to the owner, or who's actually doing the work at that point?
Typically, sorry.
Go ahead.
Typically runs with the land, so it would be responsibility of the current property owner there.
I'm trying to think of a good example. Would you be thinking of something maybe like the power company comes in and decides that they need a new easement along somebody's property? So does the burden then pass to the property owner to go back and replace the trees the power company may take out? I think we built in a bit of an exemption for the power company. So a situation like that we could handle, but I think if it's being driven by something else, I'm trying to think of a good example that we might not have thought of. Can you think of one?
A storm utility, a drainage easement,
Maybe
for
the village is doing
a
that.
private, yes, but if it's not located in the right of way, I think that might be a scenario that one of the probably 2 million that we didn't really consider on top of the 5 million we did. But I think there's probably a way for us to interpret the ordinance that is a necessary utility, and an easement would need to be granted. The current property owner would have to grant that outside individual entity to do that type of work. So I think we would have enough flexibility to be able to work something out.
To Ms. Nash's comment about not having a chance to review this and needing more time, I mean, what's staff's feel on that? Is that, I mean, how, being that I'm just coming on now, I mean, how available has this discussion and the amendment and the process been up to this point? I know it's been a process, but as far as the public involvement.
I mean, the process has been, we've had a number of meetings just to discuss this, so it's been on the books. As far as a public hearing, this is the first time that we've actually brought it to a public hearing. We've also, Paula and I were trying to coordinate a meeting earlier this week to at least sit down and discuss the proposal. For some reason, we weren't able to circle back and talk about the proposal. So that's where that is. I wanted to get back to the comment when you asked, did I want to respond to anything at this point? Landon had a host of questions that I can't really respond to adequately because I couldn't get them all in. So if Landon wants to, if you want to provide that list to us, Landon, I'll certainly try and pick off as many questions as I can, and I could prepare that for your next meeting as part of that.
Would you be willing to do that, Landon?
Yeah, I can connect with Darren. We can talk through some of those things. I think the thrust of part of it is just that look at, pass it as what it is and put it through that way. If it's a beautification ordinance, then that's what it is. But if it's a tree canopy and density ordinance, then it's something different. But I'll be happy to connect with you, Darren. We can work on that.
Okay, thank you, Landon. We can discuss this for a while, and then we're going to have to continue this until next Thursday. There's no way we can vote on it with all of these issues up in the air. But would you can go around and everyone can just sort of state your concerns, your support for this. And mind if I start with you, Matt?
Sure.
On the spot.
No, I appreciate the presentation and the history and obviously for my short tenure, it's helpful. And generally, I'm supportive of this, but do want to make sure that I guess consideration is given and the public feels like they're heard and have had time to give their input, whether that's an entity or an individual. The only other question I had was Ms. Glindsey, I believe. The document she said she handed to you, can you give more detail on what that is?
Kathy,
Forestry has been,
yeah.
I keep forgetting my mic here. There we go. So there's several forestry entities, including the Division of Forestry, that have been involved in training planners and other officials in terms of how to write a tree preservation ordinance. And so they put this document together. It's been floating around out there. I know we were looking at it last year, so it's been out for a little while. And it does provide, like, a model ordinance is in there, and it provides a list of the types of things to think about when you're putting an ordinance together. And it actually is a very handy tool for, giving yourself a thought process to walk through. So we did kind of use that early on. I think, as we all know, we've gone through several iterations, and so we probably leaned on that more heavily in the beginning of the process and maybe not so much in these, last 6 or 8 months. But it certainly wouldn't hurt us to go back and take another look at it and see if there's something in there that, could lend something to this exercise.
Well, I think in looking at the document, I was looking through some of the model, some of the references they use. Some of the references they use aren't to communities in North Carolina, and there's a significant difference between your capability in Lake Oswego, Oregon, versus Pinehurst, North Carolina. There's different enabling legislation. There's some good thoughts in there. Well, we can look at it again, and I thought it probably did help. It's been a while, then it probably did help some of our thought processes, but that's something we can share with you as well.
Else, Matt?
Then just to clarify from my own knowledge, so the 24-hour comment period from this meeting forward, and then for us to vote on it next week, does that mean the public could make comments next week at the meeting as well, if this will be on the agenda?
So what can happen, as we've clarified, within the next 24 hours, comments can still come in and be emailed to Kelly as clerk of the board. And then what can happen then with those additional comments, that will be read and distributed to the board at and prior to that meeting, where you can use those comments in deliberating and formulating your recommendation to council. So if you close the public hearing tonight, as we discussed before the meeting, but then recess this meeting to next Thursday, February 11th, and just as a note to ensure that we have enough folks available for a quorum to act on that. At this place, in the same manner that we're doing, the public hearing is closed, but we can still receive public comment for up to that 24-hour period, and then staff will be able to bring those to the board next week.
But there will not be any more public comments at the
After that
next meeting.
24-hour period, as long as you allow for that 24
For the 24 hours.
Mhm.
And then we deliberate and vote or make a motion
Yep, as long as,
as to
and
whether we want to approve it for council or not.
make a recommendation, yes. Mhm.
Does that answer your question? David?
I think having a conversation with the Home Builders Association is important. That being said, if this has been sort of in development for 3 years, I feel like they've been around to kind of have conversations and kind of guide what's been going on up to this point. If they're willing to now, and it's not going to prevent or not going to put a further stone in place to delay it further, then I don't think it could hurt. But if that's just another means to delay this being adopted, I don't know if that's going to help the process overall. I think no matter what, when you're dealing with an ordinance that is going to affect the way people can use their land and what happens on a person's property, you're going to be challenged. Nobody likes being told what they can and can't do with their own land. I do think there is, specifically in Pinehurst, a need to regulate what is going on in some manner, especially since it's currently lacking. I also don't think it's a significant enough standard that would amount to a taking by any means. You're not interfering with use enough. You're not interfering with people's value enough. So I think it'd be clear there. So yeah, I'm in support of it. If meeting with the Home Builders Association would help kind of get the information across as far as what some of the cost effects might be, it could be beneficial. But if that's just going to drag it out even further, you know, I think this does need to kind of occur sooner rather than later, if possible.
I think the home builders are under relatively new executive leadership there. I think Paul hasn't been there that long, so, and we've been trying to, again, just recently have been meeting with her to try and, you know, create and forge that a relationship with them. So we are more than willing to sit down and talk with them about their concerns. And we did, again, we tried to coordinate that meeting this week. It just didn't happen.
And those discussions have been a week and a half old or so since our first meeting. The planning board, this meeting docket was made available last Friday. So it's been out there. It's a 12-page document, and this process will not be over even after this board formulates a recommendation. There will be probably yet another, probably close to 30 days before village council can take it up in consideration for a public hearing. So this is just the first step in the formalized process, and there will be ample time for many discussions.
Philip?
Yeah, in general, I do believe something needs to be done. I kind of have the same sentiment as David. I think something needs to be done, and we need to do this in a timely manner, but we do need to be careful because I think we are walking a fine line about telling people what they can and cannot do on private property. I think I'll leave it at that. You've heard my other comments up to now, so.
I agree with the comments with the other members of the board so far. And I think this is the type of ordinance that you're going to have to use and work with and see how it plays out over the next year or two or so, and make the adjustments, if any, are necessary as you run into different circumstances with both developers and property owners. There's no way to forecast how this is going to play out, but just except by using it.
All right, so I'll make the effort to kind of stay in my lane a little bit here. You know, so I like to think back about what we were kind of asked to do. You know, certainly, you know, help staff with this process, you know, vet the verbiage, you know, bring our knowledge to the table. I think we vetted the details pretty heavily. I mean, we've all spent a lot of time on this. I don't think anybody's more time than these two right here. I think we have vetted their words, every detail. We've kicked a lot of rocks. You know, I like to say that a lot. Sometimes when we're kicking rocks, they turn something over. Sometimes they don't make me look so good, right? Because they make me look like a fool. But it's okay. I've accepted that in my life. But we've done that. And so now my thought process has turned from how do I help what we've been asked to do to vet an ordinance and write that to now I think part of what I believe my role is to turn my attention to the consistency to the comp plan. I don't know anything else we can really talk about the ordinance. I mean, you know, we probably could spend a lot of time. These two, I think they're starting to hear the same things over and over and over and over and over from us. So I think, in my mind, that process is complete. So when we think about the consistency to the comp plan, you know, we think about the new rewritten comp plan and then the envision the village before that helped us to get to the comp plan. And if I'm not incorrect there, this was a consistent theme through most of that process. And I think when we look back to the Envision the Village, a lot of that can be brought into, numbers of how many people picked what that could be consistent towards this. And it's interesting to me that that this is mentioned all the way back into the 2003 comp plan. And without a lot of action from the village, I think it's time now that maybe that there is some action, one way or the other from us. And I think that's important for us to understand when we read the comp plan. When we take a look at the purpose and intents of what we're trying to accomplish, and we relate that as well, and again, I want to reference all the way back to, we envisioned the village. We are a community of a lot of different people, a lot of different age groups, but we still have an average age that's greater than that of North Carolina. It's average that of a lot. And we attract a lot of what I always call retirement settlers, right? And so when we look at the Envision the Village and we put what was important to those people, I think that's important for us to be attractive to the retirement settler in the future. So I think that's important to what we're working here today. I also think that consistency is important for us to consider not only inside the village proper, but as we get into the development process, into the ETJ, the pressures that are involved in there. And I think this will help that have some sort of consistency throughout. And then my last thought, thank you. I commend you very much for reaching out to Paula. I have very little, I don't speak for them, but I am a past board member of Moore County Home Builders Association, and I can tell you that there is a lot of knowledge in that world. And I think it's interesting that in the 2003 comp plan, I think it mentions inclusion of home builders. So I think we've lost that in the 2019, but I think when we look back, I think that's very important, namely, again, because of the knowledge base there. And so thank you for reaching out and discussing that with them and including them in whatever process you can going forward. And otherwise, thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Paul, would you like to add something?
I think the residents' desires, wishes that are well documented, should be, what we focus on here. And I think this amendment does cover that. It would be interesting to see. I know we talked about costs for a couple of trees or the cost of not cutting down a couple of trees, but we don't do any cost analysis for other parts of the ordinance. So I'm not sure why we would, make this an exception. I think maybe we're, making more of it than what it is. But yeah, appreciate everyone's hard effort. Look forward to pushing this through. Thank you very much.
Okay. I'd like to add my 2 cents to this. Pinehurst, I think, is the home of golf, and it's a retirement community. We have the USGA coming here. Tourism is a big thing. We have a lot of people that retired here because of the charm and the environment, the trees, the nature that's available here. And this is a seller's market, and development is increasing, and developers want to make money. All of us want to make money, whatever we're doing. But this, I think, is an ordinance for Pinehurst, for our community, for the homeowners who want to maintain the value of their home and their neighborhoods. And I think to keep Pinehurst and live up to the USGA's standards and tourist standards, that we need to take care of Pinehurst. And I think maintaining the pine, and it's going to be an urban forest now with all the development, and for wildlife and everything else. So I commend you on your efforts. I think this is a good thing for Pinehurst.
I think on that note, the building that's going to go on, you mentioned, there's only so much land left. So what do we want the development on that land to look like? I think the minimum that this does is it makes people more thoughtful in that process. And if that's going to help the future of how everything is going to look, I think it's the step that needs to be taken.
This is a very special ecosystem. You don't find this anyplace else in North Carolina, and I think ours has survived because of Fort Bragg. but I think we need to protect that as well for future generations. But anyway. So at this point, does anyone else have anything else that they want to add? We need to close the public hearing. I have a motion to close the public hearing, but not the meeting. We're going to continue the meeting. Is that correct, Alex? I need your advice on proper procedure here.
So you can open the floor for a motion to close the public hearing
Okay,
in a second, and then take a vote. And then after that, you can open the floor for a motion to recess this meeting till next Thursday, February 11th at 4 p.m., conducted in the same manner as it's conducted now, where staff will be able to provide any further public comment received within 24 hours. Again, I just make sure that everyone, that we can ensure a quorum next Thursday. And we do have, we have a placeholder to reserve Assembly Hall. So we had that earmarked already.
okay, so can we have a motion? Someone like to make a motion to close the public hearing?
I move to close the public hearing and continue the regular meeting.
Okay, we have a motion by Jack. Do we have a second? Second by David. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we are back in our regular session. The public meeting has been closed. I think we need to discuss availability for February 11th before we can continue.
Can that be conducted Zoom, partially Zoom, or Zoom? Or
Yes, in the same manner that we are today, where
Okay,
board members can participate in person and via Zoom.
okay, and that doesn't jeopardize the ability to make a decision, is that correct?
That's correct.
We have the small area workshop next Thursday night, correct?
Correct.
But that's at 6, yeah.
We would meet
It'd be
at
done by then.
4. Philip? Jack,
Available.
Available.
are you available
Yes, ma'am. I'm
at
available.
4? Paul?
Yes, I am.
Would you be available, Paul? I can't.
Yes.
Yes?
And we may also be able to have Julia and Sonia available as well. So it looks like we'll,
So we should have a quorum. And we'll excuse you, David. All right, so then we need to have a motion at this time to continue.
I jumped ahead. There's still one more item left on this agenda of this meeting before we recess this meeting till next week.
Okay.
The
so we
board,
can-
organization, and membership. So you can just move right on to that agenda item.
All right. Next item on the agenda is general business. And at this point, thank you, Alex, I appreciate your guidance here. Matt is the newest member, and I thought it'd be nice for him to tell the rest of the board a little bit about himself, and then everyone can introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about them, so you know what you've gotten into.
Sure, thank you. Again, Matt Jones. My wife and I have lived here in Moore County since 2009. I grew up in Fayetteville, went to Pinehurst, NC State for engineering, and worked for the Corps of Engineers for about 4.5 years at Fort Bragg, working in military construction. Then left that and taught at Pinecrest for 2 years. Enjoyed that thoroughly. They let you teach without a license in North Carolina. Just kidding. They have the provisional license, so it's temporary unless you take a lot of classes. So that was a temporary move, and then got back into the engineering world doing design, water and sewer, particularly for McGill Associates, for now the past 4.5 years. So my wife and I have 2 girls, a 3.5-year-old and a almost 9-month-old, Magnolia and Clementine, and got to see them a lot in the past 9 months of working from home. And we're involved at Christ Community Church in the community, and just have come to love Moore County. It's felt like home. My wife's from Asheboro, so we're both kind of from this part of the state. My grandparents lived in Carthage when I was a kid, and Ellerby, so I've spent time in Moore County over the years, but never thought I would end up here, but I'm glad we did, because it's just been a great spot. So was looking for an opportunity to serve, and saw this last year come up, and thought this would be a good way to leverage things I've learned on the engineering side, but also to learn more, and to be a part of a team, and what you guys are doing as an advisory board. So I'm excited about that. Anything else pertinent I can share? I'm working on a Master's of Divinity as well, about many years into a degree that I'm about 2 years away from finishing. So do that at night when I'm not sleeping. So.
All right. David, you want to just introduce yourself? And
No, it's good
tell
to hear
me a
other
little
people aren't sleeping. We were talking earlier, my name's David Alzamora. I'm an attorney in the area. Grew up here. My wife and I moved back in October of 2019. We have a 4-month-old, which explains the lack of sleep. We're getting there, baby steps, figuratively. But yeah, just glad to have you on the board. Thanks for joining. Excited to work with you. Aside from you two, I guess we're on the longest right now, so.
You're not the new guy anymore.
Yeah, it's nice.
Philip?
Yeah, so Philip Shoemaker. I'm originally from Maryland, suburbs of D.C., but I've got family in Robbins that still lives in Robbins, and I go up there all the time. So day job, I work for the state of North Carolina doing economic development for EDP&C. So we really contract to the Department of Commerce. That's my day job, and then help manage some family investment properties in the area. On the side, I don't sleep much either. So if you need to phone call somebody at like 2 a.m., I'm usually up between 2 and 3 or 4. Before that, I was actually active duty military Air Force. I was a meteorologist in the Air Force. So before that, but I've been here since about 2013.
I'm Jack Farrell. I've been associated off and on with Pinehurst for about 60 years, and after I retired, I came back down. My career was primarily in managing IT organizations, technical support, and consulting in that regards. Since returning back here about 11 years ago, I've been involved in the community substantially through the archives. Also got on the Historic Preservation Commission and the civic group, and you name it, along with being on council for a short period of time, and worked on the comprehensive plan exhaustively for some period of time. So hopefully I can bring some information to you in that regards.
Good to meet you.
Welcome, Matt.
Thanks.
So I've met you a number of times, socially enough to say that I know you, right? So welcome aboard. I always like this process because I get to tell you, I came here in 2003. I don't know if I've ever told you that. I did leave for a short amount of time, came back. My background has always been construction sales. Pre-COVID, COVID has changed my daily life dramatically. Now I'm likely to clean, I'm the janitor, I'm the shipper, I'm all of it. But, pre-COVID, I've been on a lot of construction sites, so I like to use that knowledge into what we do today. So welcome aboard.
Paul?
Welcome. I'm Paul Roberts. I'm retired military. I came to Moore County in '92 due to the military, and retired a couple years ago, and currently on a defense contract. Thank you.
Look forward to meeting you.
And I'm Cindy Burnett. I've been here since 2014, and I retired from Wake County government, where I worked in the General Services Department as a facility planner, designer, maintaining the database of all the buildings in Wake County, which is quite a few. And so most of my career was facility planning. So, but welcome aboard. We're glad to have you.
Thanks.
All right, so next item on the agenda is to elect a board member to serve as the first vice chair. And I sent out an email with, some information on everyone Is there anyone that would like to volunteer for the position? Is there anyone that you would like to, someone would like to nominate for the position?
I was going to suggest Jeremy, actually, if he was interested.
Second that nomination.
I was going to nominate Jack. If I can get a second on that.
You have the option, Jeremy. You can accept or decline. It's up to you, whatever your schedule is.
I definitely would accept. I mean, I just think it's, if you guys are inclined. I am pretty wordy if you've not figured that out sometimes.
Well, you can practice shortening it up if you think you're too wordy. All right, so we have a motion to nominate Jeremy as the first vice chair with a second nomination by Philip, a second by Jack. Let's just do a roll call. Matt?
Aye.
David?
Yeah, I think that's great.
Paul?
I support Jeremy.
Jack?
Yes, agreed?
Philip, I know you do because you do. Well, Jeremy, if you will accept, you are now the first vice chair of Planning and Zoning Board.
Thank you.
Thank
I don't know
you.
what it means, but it's great.
Congratulations.
You'll find out. Okay, so then the other item is the suggested meeting date for council, which is, we've come up with a date of Thursday, February 18th, which is 2 weeks from today at 4 or 4:30. Would that date work for everyone?
Well, the council meetings start at 4:30 normally, so
Yes.
are you anticipating a half-hour earlier start or something to that effect?
Well, it's on a Thursday, so I don't think they meet
Oh, that's
on-
right. I'm
They meet on
thinking-
Tuesdays.
Never mind.
This is virtual, it'll be a virtual meeting?
Yes, this will be a Zoom meeting.
How long do you expect it to go?
I have no idea, but I would think an hour or two, and you're welcome to leave if you have to. Okay. You can just, okay,
So it'll be virtual only, is that correct?
yes.
Okay, understand.
Council meetings are virtual now.
So if we start, I mean, does it matter? I'd prefer 4 o'clock so that we can be done. Does that work for everybody? And then we'll just, council will have to determine. Does that work for you, Philip? How about Paul?
Yes, February 18th works for me fine. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll suggest that, propose that to council, and then they'll vote on it and determine if that works for them as well. Everyone has kind of given their suggestions of what we want to talk about, and I've emailed a summary of what everybody said, but we kind of need to nail that down. So if you will look through that, cross out things that you don't think are relevant or don't want to talk about, highlight the things that you do so we can narrow it down, change whatever, and send that back to me, then we'll get discussion topics to present to council. Does that work? Do you want to add anything?
No?
They'll meet this coming Tuesday, so it should be set after their meeting this coming Tuesday.
Right. So we should know next Thursday when we continue this meeting, what we're going to do.
Oh, yeah, we should know by Tuesday night, so we should be able to form you on Wednesday. Just email you. Confirm it.
All right, is there anything else that anyone wants?
I just want to give, and I'm glad Matt brought it up, but I want to give a plug for that small area plan virtual meeting that we're having on the 11th, next week at 6. If you go to our project webpage, you can register for that meeting. I think we're just north of 40 people so far registered for it, so please, we're trying to get up to at least, we'd like to get at least 70 people. I don't think, I've seen some of the participant list, I don't think you all were on, so please sign up if you do get a chance. Yes, yeah, Melissa had, I think we put it on our Facebook page, it's been in a press release, so it's been I've been getting out the virtual means, and I've been sending out to, please feel free, I think I sent you the flyer and the links. Please send that out to people that you might know that might be interested.
I sent it to the Lake Association, so. Okay, so now we need a motion to continue this meeting until February 11th at 4:00 PM at Village Hall via Zoom meeting platform to allow for the required minimum of a 24-hour commitment period. And comments can be sent to the clerk prior to action by the Planning and Zoning Board. So do I have a move to continue?
To continue recess.
Either one would work, but recess is a little cleaner.
Okay.
Recess?
I move to recess public hearing number 1 to Thursday, February 11th at 4 PM at Village Hall and via the Zoom meeting platform to allow for the required minimum of a 24-hour commitment period. Comments can be sent to the clerk prior to action by the Planning and Zoning Board.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Jeremy, a second by Philip. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It was an aye from you, Paul. All right, so I guess we are recessed until next Thursday. And we have a Board of Adjustment meeting after this. Is that what you?
What I was going to
Go
say,
ahead.
if we could, and this is for Lori's benefit as well, if she's back there, if we could take maybe a 5-minute break for those who need to stay for the Board of Adjustment meeting, at least need to sit. All those who don't need to sit for it, if you want to hang out, please do. But I would appreciate the break. And that'll give us time to get reset up and show the screen that is Board of Adjustment and see if Julia has been able to.
If we
If not,
recess
then-
until 6 o'clock, will that be enough time?
We will convene the Board of Adjustment at 6 o'clock.
Yeah. So Board of Adjustment will start, convene until 6 o'clock. You know the terms.
You all have enough people, right?
Yes, should.
How would you approach the archives?
Might as well,
with it?
because
Should I
you're an
just go
alternate.
show?
Oh,
Once you
yeah,
come
sure,
on.
just bring it in.
Julia, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, everyone's there?
So,
I don't
Everyone
have
that's gonna
I don't have video yet.
oh,
I'm just currently seeing the screenshot Village of Pinehurst.
that's correct. Can she see us? Oh, so once you start,
Okay, everyone's there? I don't have video yet. I'm getting audio feedback of myself.
she said she won't, the video doesn't start until you start the meeting, and then she can switch it to the meeting, to us.
Everyone's there? Cindy, will you let them know that I'm having a delayed echo of myself?
She's having a delayed echo of herself?
Like a delay of everything.
Not sure why. Do you want to just try and start the meeting and see if it clears it up?
Sure. This echo of myself is really distracting, so I hope it goes away. Cindy, will you let them know that I'm having a delayed echo of myself?
Oh.
Actually, I can't talk over myself. I'm yelling at myself.
I think that needs to be corrected.
Sure. This echo of myself is
What can we do, Alex?
so I hope it goes away. Oh.
Can you sign off and sign back on?
Are you talking to me, Cindy?
Yes,
can't-
I am.
I can't hear over all the audio coming back at me. Okay, I'll sign out and try again.
I haven't seen that one.
I haven't either. Oh, my God.
Again.
Can you hear yourself?
Well, it takes about 30 seconds before the echo begins, so at present, we're good. But let's go ahead and try, and I'll hope it doesn't happen again. All right, so, welcome. I'd like to call today's meeting of the Board of Adjustment to order. Today is Thursday, February 4th, 2021, and the time is 6:05 p.m. This is a regular, oh, that's really distracting. I'm very big on that wall. Okay, that's fine. This is a regular meeting of the Board of Adjustment, notice properly given. This meeting is being held electronically, at least for me, using the virtual platform of Zoom in an effort to comply with Governor Cooper's executive order to address the COVID-19 health emergency. We have a quorum present today. Permanent members are Cindy Burnett, Jeremy Hooper, David Alzamora, and myself, Julia Latham. As a housekeeping note, this procedure today is being videotaped, so we ask everyone to please speak into their microphones. And with that, our first order of business is to approve the minutes of our regular meeting of the Board of Adjustment from Thursday, November 11th, 2020. At this time, I'll ask those present on the board if there are any corrections to those minutes. Hearing no corrections, I'll ask if we have a motion to approve the minutes from the November 11th meeting.
I will move to approve the meetings from the November 5th, 2020 regular meeting.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Who made that second?
David.
I'm sorry. Okay, thank you,
David.
David. Okay, a motion was made by Cindy and seconded by David. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion made and carried. The minutes from our November 11th meeting are approved. Turning to our general business, the only thing on our agenda today is naming a new permanent member to the Board of Adjustment. Joel Schreiber ended his term with the Board of Adjustment with our thanks earlier this month. I think actually perhaps yesterday, Darren, if I'm not wrong.
At the end of January.
Was it the end of January? Okay, thank you. And so we need to seat a new permanent member. Are there any nominations from this board at this time?
I would like to nominate Jack Farrell.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, was that David again?
Yep.
Okay, motion made by Cindy and seconded by David to nominate Jack Farrell. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'm going to ask for a voice vote. All in favor of asking Mr. Farrell to join us on the Board of Adjustment, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Well, this motion carries unanimously, and I would like to, at this time, welcome Jack, who I assume is probably in the audience where I can't see him, to the Board of Adjustment with our thanks for your service. I've spoken to Jack previously, so I know that he has interest in joining us, so I don't think he'll have an issue with being at the table next month. And we'll be delighted to have him there. So thank you, Jack. No further business, Alex. So our next meeting date is March 4th, 2020. And I understand from my last conversation with Alex that we do have a potential application for a variance before us. Is that still true?
That is true. We do have an official application for a variance before the Board of Adjustment, and therefore we'll need to meet on March 4th, 2021.
Great. Did I say 2020? Sorry, 2021. All right. Any other discussion before I ask for a motion to adjourn, Board? Very good. Hearing no further discussion, I'll ask if we have a motion to adjourn this meeting.
I motion that we adjourn this meeting.
Thank you, Jeremy. Second, anyone?
I'll do the third second.
Okay. We have a motion that has been seconded to adjourn. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. And this meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much. And Jack, we look forward to seeing you with us next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in and doing this meeting.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate everyone's forbearance with my crazy afternoon.
We'll be in touch, Julia. Thank